With the ghost of Diana sitting firmly alongside Meghan and Harry, the explosive interview with Oprah has just aired in the United States and in Australia. Soon, the UK will get their turn to tune in. And Lee, all I can say is, wow, who was it? Which member of the royal family speculated, with some degree of concern by the sounds of it, about the potential colour of Meghan and Harry's future children? Who was it?
Oh, I think we need to hold a poll about who. There's many people within the. We think it could be.
Could be any of them.
Could be anyone.
My money's with Charles. I think it was Charles, reading some of the clues in this amazing conversation that the likes of which we haven't seen before, because people have been comparing it to the Diana sit-down chat, but that was carefully constructed, carefully choreographed. Yes, this was a little bit, but nothing like that one. My money, putting all the clues together, is they were talking about Charles.
Oh, I mean, it automatically you think, oh, it was Philip. But yeah, the thing with it is, I kind of think, well, if you're gonna give us that information, just tell us the whole story. Don't kind of, well, I don't want to say that because I don't want to put that person's reputation. Well, we're now sat there going, well, it could be this person, it could be this person, it could be this person. Just say who it is. Just tell us.
Yeah, they've implicated everybody in the royal family now.
Yeah, we're going to all be sat there thinking, and it's going to just be the thing that is going to be latched onto, and it's, just say it. Just tell us.
So come on, Lee, how were you feeling watching this? Was this enthralling stuff?
It was fascinating. It's very glossy. It's very American. It's very Oprah. She has a style. You're listening to what they're saying, but you're also looking at them as well to kind of look at body language and see if their body language matches up to what they're saying. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Lee, was this undignified? I mean, we don't see the royal family doing this, as you say. Was it undignified? Should they have done it?
I don't know. I didn't think it was particularly undignified. They didn't go into, they didn't really say anything that we probably hadn't already guessed. So, they weren't kind of, I wanted more. I wanted more information. I was kind of sat there going, they'd say something, and I'd say, right, well, when did that happen? Who was there? What were they wearing? Yeah. So no, I don't think that it was undignified. I don't think it will go down well with people in the UK because we don't like that. But,
Absolutely fascinating, as you say. I mean, look, Meghan's story is so eerily similar to Diana. Anyone who's read about Diana or followed her life, self-harming, isolation, trying desperately not to weep in public, trapped, sabotaged, stripped of royal titles, total breakdown. Diana used to call it the suffocation. The similarities between what Meghan and Harry were describing, eerie.
Yeah. I think there are some similarities. The cynic in me was kind of you're an actress, you've been trained how to kind of portray yourself. It's easy in some ways to kind of put the Diana similarities in there. But like I said, we don't know exactly what went on behind closed doors. But it does, there are real strong comparisons. And kudos to Harry for kind of recognizing that and going, I'm not putting my family through this. I'm out.
It was always going to be a powder keg with Harry, though. He was always on this trajectory, if you ask me. He was the boy whose mother was not protected by the institution, an institution that was actively damaging her reputation. They possibly killed her, quite frankly. And then he was always going to grow up and choose a woman who has indifference or disregard for that institution. He might not have consciously been out there, but it was always his trajectory, in my opinion. And boy, did he pick a woman, she, by her own acknowledgement at the start, to what extent we believe this or not, but didn't know much about the royal family, hadn't researched it, didn't know anything. And the mere fact that she sat down and done this interview shows that she really is not in awe of this institution.
You see, that was one of my kind of main bugbears. I know she said, I didn't really know much about the royal family. I hadn't done any research. I don't believe that because, they're one of the most, famous families in the entire world. If you're going out with somebody who's in the royal family, you do your research, you look into what's happened in the past. I don't kind of hold the lead. Yeah, I was just in love with Harry and I didn't really mind. No, I think she will have known stuff. Perhaps not the kind of like nuances of stuff that happens, which that she kind of discussed, but I think she will have done a Google search.
It seems to me that everyone had a view of Meghan before this interview started. What do you make of her now after watching this?
I still don't know. She comes across as a really pleasant person. She was articulate. She put her thoughts together really well. I kind of wonder if that is it a woman thing and the royal family? Is it because, traditionally women don't, they do as they're told. And then she came in and she was like, well, no, actually, I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it like this. And wasn't being particularly rude or obnoxious. She was just putting forward her opinion. And perhaps they didn't like that. And then so therefore think, well, she's rude. She's a bully. I don't know. I don't know her as a person. I can only go off what I've seen
Oh,
in
Lee,
the interview.
you're far less judgmental than me because I agree. She was highly articulate, much more intelligent than I had realized before watching that. She's a she's a player, if you want to call it that. That's the impolite way of putting it. Or you can say that she's canny. That's a polite way of putting it. But this woman gets what she wants. She absolutely does. There was a steel in her that I suspected was there, and it was confirmed through this interview. That story she told about she wasn't the one to make Catherine cry, but the other way around. Even if you take her version of events as the truth, she was still crying because she didn't get her own way.
I don't know how much you can kind of read into it. The thing is, we don't really know very much about Kate anyway. It goes back to the royal families. They only let us see what they want us to see. So
Oh, we've saw a lot more of them tonight, though, through the eyes of someone who I believe probably went in there in some way to do a little bit of sabotage, potentially. Certainly, if they crossed her and she perceives that they have, and this was akin to a tell-all. It was explosive to say the least. It really was.
it's like, sort of like thorns wrapped in silk. It's kind of like you could detect the kind of barbs underneath the kind of veneer of. It was like what you read into it. So I'm sat there watching it and going, "Oh, yeah, they mean that and they mean this," and which is it was a bit frustrating because I kind of wanted them to just kind of just say it how it is. Don't give us sort of teasers. Just if you're going to do this, give us the whole thing.
This was pretty direct. I mean, she talked about completely being isolated, not shown how to do things, set up to fail, told to pull her head in, lay low, almost made to feel she was responsible for all the publicity that was there. She's on tour doing a great job by her own version of events, and yet she and Harry in particular points out that the royal family was threatened by that because that he'd seen it before with his mother.
Watching it and then sitting back and thinking about it, I'm wondering. My take on it is that they didn't like her, and when I say they, she did say that the royal family isn't just the Queen and Philip and Charles. There is like a whole sort of
Mm,
army of royalty and advisors,
yeah.
and whether or not they decided we don't like you because you're not doing what we want you to do, and you're not doing what we're telling you to do, so therefore we're not going to help you. We're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to kind of fit in. So I kind of think, well, is that what happened? Did she kind of like rock the boat and make them feel threatened, as Diana did, to a lesser or greater extent back in her day, and they just pulled pulled rank and thought, no, sink or swim, babes, get on with it.
What were the standout moments to you? What made you gasp?
Well, obviously, there's the revelation that she was pulled aside by a member of the royal family and was questioned about what kind of color Archie was going to be when he was born. That is kind of just gobsmacking, and everyone is going to be going, who is that going to be? So that is genuinely a really unpleasant side of the firm.
Can
um,
I talk to that, Lee, for a sec? This is going to sound like I'm trying to make an excuse for racism, and I am absolutely not. Depending on the context, though, which we don't know and they didn't go into, and Harry refused to elaborate on, but they were obviously both offended by what this person has said, and they have every right to be so. But in families, when there is somebody, well, actually, it seems like this comment was made before she was pregnant, to be honest. By the end, in the first version of events, it was unclear when Harry talked about it. It was just about, no, you're getting together with Meghan. So I wonder what colour skin your children are going to have. That's harder to excuse, actually. I was going to go down that track of every family sort of uh, tries to think about what children will look like from a couple, because we all do it. And I was wondering if maybe there was a more innocent context, but actually, after he gave a bit more context at the end, yeah, I don't know if we can really use that excuse.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I agree with you. People do. If somebody's got red hair, they go, "I wonder if your child will have red hair." If it's in the context of, light-hearted, affection, but it didn't sound like it was. It sounded like it was, we're wondering what's going to happen and what kind of effect will this have on the monarchy. Nobody cares. Nobody, like she said, nobody. It hadn't even entered their minds. It was just a really bizarre thing, for them to say. But we know about the royal family, how they, anything that is perceived as that doesn't fit in with their image, from history, is removed. So we talked about members of the royal family that had mental health issues, that had physical disabilities, hundreds of years ago, that just disappeared. They were sent places. So it's not. I don't think you can be wholly surprised, but you would have think in this day and age it wouldn't be an issue.
Well, there was always the rumor that Diana might have been pregnant and might have been actually knocked off because she was carrying a child that wasn't British. I mean, the one thing I have to say about this, it really did remind me of um, your King Edward, wasn't it, with Wallace Warfield Simpson, who
Mm.
abdicated and famously was exiled. This reminded me of exactly the type of interview that they would have done, because they did do interviews in the time, and they talked about the same thing, that the establishment, it was so suffocating, and they wanted to contribute differently to the world, but the monarchy couldn't let them do that within their own parameters, so they had to leave it, they had to exit.
It hasn't really progressed as
No,
as 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 time has gone on, has it? It's and this could have been the ideal opportunity to really modernize the royal family, and whether or not the firm is just so terrified of change that they just don't want to go down that route. They want to have it as it's always been. You don't know. It's a strange concept.
I found it fascinating when they were talking about that relationship that exists between the media, especially the tabloid media, and the monarchy. I didn't realize, I always felt that they were pitted against each other. And obviously, to an extent, they are, but I didn't realize that there was this fear, morbid fear, according to Harry, that, as soon as the media decides to start sort of campaigning for a republic and turning against this family and talking about them as a blight on the taxpayer, that could lead to the revolution, because they are one of the last standing monarchs in the world. Certainly the only one really that's still rooted in such a long history of tradition. They haven't modernized, as you've just pointed out, at all. I found that fascinating. What was really sad about this interview, though, was the family relationships that
Mm.
have been broken or battered or bruised.
Yeah, I remember when Diana died. and the years that followed, those two boys seemed to just really pull together and were such a tight knit unit, that this seems to be really sad that they've gone in different directions. I mean, people may argue that that would have happened anyway. People grow up, they have relationships, and they don't say the same. But we always kind of hoped that that wouldn't happen with Wills and Harry, that they'd always remain tight. I think that it sounds like he still has a really good relationship with the Queen, and that's lovely. But it doesn't sound like at the moment he's got a particularly great relationship with Charles.
I mean, when Harry said he literally didn't return my calls, I mean, I know there's
Mm.
another side to that, but as a dad, I don't even know how to reconcile that, if I'm going to be perfectly frank.
Mm. In general, the royal family and how they interact with each other, all their kind of like foibles and rules and regulations, it is really bizarre. You kind of like think if you kind of move what some of the stuff that they do into your own family, you'd be like, really? We do that? We curtsy to each other? Um, it's a completely different world. But then I kind of let you think, well, if that's all they know, then
Do you know what really stood out to me about this, actually, the more I think about it, is the fact that everything we always suspected about the royal family was sort of confirmed here, that it's dysfunctional, that they don't talk to each other about their feelings, that they're quite terrified of talking about mental health or the way somebody might not be coping, that it is rooted in an institution rooted in fear of many external factors like the media or like being seen as real people, because they go to great lengths, don't they, to only be a perception. Harry, his part of the interview confirmed all of that to be true.
mm, one of the things that she said that was really interesting was that she said that when they'd found out that Philip had gone into hospital, she wanted to pick up the phone and speak to the Queen, like you would do in any family. You would, if you
Mm.
heard that somebody was ill or something had happened, you just pick up the phone and say, "How are you?" But the royal family don't really act like that. They don't seem to have that kind of, whether they do and we don't know about it. But there seems to be like they write letters to each other, um, and,
Yeah,
and send a letter, rather than just picking a phone up, which I find really strange.
there was some really telling language used by both of them in this interview. At one point, it was only a passing reference, but she referred to them as that family. And he also referred to them as they on at least two occasions that I picked up, creating that whole sense of it's definitely them being the family, and Meghan and Harry over here. Like there is such a fracture there, such a distance that I think they're very comfortable in now. What do you think it was, Lee? This contradiction that I just can't make sense of, though, that they've broken away because they didn't feel supported and because they want to lead this more independent, natural life for their children. Yet they scream for their privacy. Yet this is the most high profile interview of our generation. How does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, people will argue you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say, right, we want our privacy, but yet we want to do certain things. You can argue that, but you can also argue that times have changed, and this is how we live our lives. This is the way we do things. I personally don't. I don't really care what title they have. So
Just such a contradiction, though, honestly, to be so aggrieved by a lack of privacy and intrusion in their lives and to sit down with Oprah Winfrey is bizarre. It reads to me like this was spite. All the stories that are coming out about Meghan that the palace are absolutely behind, because they're all old rehashed stories for anyone who follows it closely, about her bullying staff and having tantrums and getting upset by the most silly of things and staff leaving and all of that. All those stories are out there. I tend to believe or think there's at least a good nugget of truth in each one of those stories. And I can't help but think that this interview that I just watched wasn't motivated by a woman needing to tell her story as much as it was motivated by spite and revenge.
Hmm. I think there's a bit of both. I think you're quite right. I think there's an element of both in it. Um, yeah. Um, I don't think you can take you can't if you kind of like think she's having all these stories said about her constantly, whether they're true or not. You're not just going to go, yeah, that's fine. You're going to want to have your own say. So yeah,
What was
there's a
with the
little bit.
chickens? Why do we have to see the chickens so many times?
Are they going to get a title? Is it going to be Her Royal Highness
Will
Chucky
they lay
Chuck?
golden eggs?
I mean that kind of stuff just made you cringe a little bit because it was like, we're a normal family. Look, we've got chickens. We've got a
Oh,
dog.
you shouldn't be rude about that. This is what people do when you get together and you have children. Something biological happens to you. You're suddenly painting the nursery and you're up on the roof. I did masculine things when I had kids and was like nest. It's called nesting, and these two are nesting big time.
I well,
I
I
thought
was
it was cute.
it was cute. I was disappointed that they were ordinary chickens. I would have wanted some sort of like
What did you
really.
want?
I wanted like those fancy chickens that have like huge feathers, griffins, unicorns. That would have impressed me.
Unicorns. Oh man, I have to say it was beautifully shot too. I couldn't help but look at the whole thing because there was definitely, I wouldn't quite call it a soft lens, but they'd set up this beautiful shot to make sure that Oprah, who's about 109, looked like a woman in her 60s. It was beautifully shot. The grounds they were on were stunning as well.
Yeah, good. They obviously have good friends with good houses. That's all you need in Hollywood. A good friend with a good house that can lend you a good lighting rig as well.
I couldn't believe it when Harry was going into the financials of his life. I don't know why that
Mm.
particularly stood out because that's so undignified and so not the British thing to do, to talk about your income and your money, especially at his level. And there he is talking about, well, no, we've been cut off. We don't get any money from the royal family. This was all with my mother's money.
Yeah,
But
that
I
was a
think
bit.
he was
Yeah.
trying to make the point that Diana had predicted the need for a separate, nest egg, and that's what he was implying strongly.
If you earn your own coin, that is perfect. Do with it what you will. The fact is that we, as the British public, pay for the royal family through our taxes. So, if you leave the royal family, should you continue to have income or not? I kind of like think, well, no. I agree that to a certain level they are very high profile. So should they not have an element of protection? But then I kind of like think, well, if you're not part of the royal family anymore, you're like a celebrity.
I must admit that crossed my mind too. They were sort of pleading for sympathy around, oh, the family wouldn't even pay for our security, and I'm like, you don't live in the same circles as us. You would have been able to find the moolah to pay for your own security. I felt like, am I being harsh there? But I was really like, honestly, if that wealthy and your family say they're not paying for your security anymore, well, go and pay for it yourself, quite frankly. What happens next, Lee? What's the fallout going to be? Because you and I have sort of been resisting watching the teasers or the feedback, and we've just watched it together online. And the standout headline is absolutely going to be the accusation of racism. It's
Mhm.
got to be, because that was the most explosive moment of the interview. I'm predicting the fallout is going to be, well, fascinating to watch. I actually think the fallout will be different in the UK. I think it will probably be, when they do the polls, perceived as undignified and just not what you do and ungrateful and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas in the US, I think they're going to be heroes.
And I think it'll be a generation thing as well. I think
Uh-huh,
if I
uh-huh.
think my parents, who are kind of like in their 70s, they can't stand her. They can't stand him. They liked him. Before he was married, he could do no wrong. Now they can't stand him. It's like, oh well, he's burnt his bridges. Get away. Whereas people who are younger are kind of like, well, good for them.
Oh, it's going to rate through the roof as well. It's, It's an unbelievable piece of television history, though, I have to say, and it'd be interesting to see if there are ripple-on effects for the institution, which is always at risk. I mean, and people think that's a new thing. It's been at risk for hundreds of years, and in fact, it's even been disillusioned at points in history as well. So, I mean, the monarch is actually a much more fragile institution than what most people would think. Will this bring it to its knees? I doubt it, purely because I think it's more of a divisive interview than the royal family have purely done something wrong. I think it absolutely will, though, for the younger generation, wave a big flag in the air that you guys need to modernize, you need to shape up, you need to modernize now, at least make some gestures of modernization.
I don't. And to be honest with you, I don't think the younger generation really care about the royal family.
Yeah, but
Um,
Lee, that's precisely the problem. Harry and William back in the day represented why young people would become invested in the institution, and they were taking great strides in modernising Invictus Games, mental health. The four of them together, or three of them at one point before Meghan joined the clan, they were doing great things. They were talking about things that the monarchy had never done. The hope was in them. And it feels like this fracture now, with the fracture also goes the hope that the younger generation would care about the monarchy.
Yeah, I think if they don't learn the lessons and pull together and go, right, what can we learn from this and how can we make things better? Again, I think it goes back to the people that surround the royal family. I don't think it's the royal family per se themselves as individuals. I think it's the firm that have the say in what happens. And I think until that changes, it won't change. Let's have a reality TV series where we put them all in a palace, but cameras everywhere like Big Brother. That's the way to go. That's how we do things nowadays. Let's do that.
And it would be a palace that unexpectedly plays pranks on them, like blows smoke into a room, and all of a sudden they have to freeze like statues for 30 minutes, or they lose,
Yeah.
things like that, right?
Yeah, is this partridge or is it just ordinary chicken? What is it? I would pay money to see the Queen sat on a diary room throne talking about her
Oh
day.
dear. Oh dear. Yeah, well, it should be saying, my great granddaughter has done an interview and one is not amused. Something like that. Anyway, Lee, it's been interesting. I can't wait to watch the fallout. Funnily enough, I'm about to go to bed. You're about to go and wander into the newspapers and gear up for the live telecast in the UK, probably.
Yeah, interesting. It's going to be very interesting. The only thing that I think that will distract from it is if Philip pops off today. If whether or not somebody is creeping into that room with a pillow to kind of just pop over his face, we don't know. But I think that is the
Stop it.
that
Don't
is
say that. By the
that.
time that I put this podcast up, he might have passed away and you're going to feel really bad.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody might have accidentally pulled that plug out of something, and yeah, the interview was cancelled.
The last words he ever hears are, switch him off. Lee, it's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. We bestow our best wishes from the UK to the colonies.